Hello, I'm George Kalantzis. Throughout the history of our country, men and women have gone off to war to fight for freedom. They go with only one hope, the hope to survive. Dale Franz of Canton, Ohio is one such survivor. Born in 1916 and raised on a farm in South Dakota, Franz's father moved his family to Canton in 1937. Franz volunteered his services to his country with 4 of his friends when he was 21.
Administration they had there in Canton said that we were volunteering for a year and we would all be signed up and go to Columbus, the Fort Hays headquarters. And I was sworn in February 12th, 1941.
With high hopes of being sent to Texas to work for the Air Force, Franz was disappointed when he was ordered to go to San Francisco with the Army. While in San Francisco, Franz said the newly sworn-in soldiers received uniforms but did not receive any basic training. Instead, they were shipped overseas where they would be taught the basic skills needed to survive in a battle.
Then we got orders and we were leaving San Francisco on March 30th in 1941. There was about 500 of us got on the Republic and started for the Philippines.
After arriving in the Philippines on April 21, 1941, Franz was stationed on the island of Corregidor, commonly referred to as the Rock. He was a member of the 60th Coast Artillery, where he was assigned as a searchlight operator. Franz was stationed in Corregidor for approximately a year and a month.
You would turn your light on and control them from the ears and from the distant control, so as you controlled the position of the light where it was shining. They had 6 million candle power. They were quite strong, and they would light up planes at 25 and 30,000 feet.
Franz took his job as a light operator very seriously, but it was exactly that, a job. That is, until the Japanese crept closer and closer to Corregidor, and the realization of actually going to battle hit home. Then, on December 7, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. More than 2,400 people were killed, 188 planes were destroyed, and 8 battleships were damaged or sunk.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
On the following day, December 8th, Japan initiated an airborne attack on the Philippines.
The Japanese were doing everything they could to get to Corregidor. They have 2 miles of water between us and Marvelis, where they were. So they give us a hard time with all their ammunition and guns and planes and what have you. And the first guy the Japanese killed on Corregidor was a friend of mine. Curl was his last name. And when our first sergeant knew that one of his men was killed by the Japanese that day, he was really upset, really upset.
The Japanese began to bomb Corregidor day and night.
You press my light and go right down to the water just below this cliff. And Japanese were coming in on barges within, I would say, maybe 500 yards. And they would get off and climb up the cliffs to where we were.
Franz's searchlight illuminated the sky to detect any planes in the surrounding area. Many soldiers were not even aware that the Japanese had already landed. As the attack reached the climax on the night of May 5th, Franz stood, operating his light while the Japanese shot down at him. When he heard the bombs dropping and watched as light after light went out, Franz realized that he was alone, the last light on Corregidor.
The light was hit oh, probably 10 or a dozen times with me standing holding it, but we just kept on going and doing what we could. Well, the first thing you know, something happened. I don't have no idea what, but I was knocked out and my light was destroyed, and I woke up. I don't know how many hours, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours. Nobody knows how many hours, and but when I come to, it was real dark, probably midnight. I realized that there was nothing left for me to do except to move, and if I stopped and listened, I could tell there was Japanese on all sides of us. Within a quarter of a mile, with its back of us, was a row of machine guns from the 60th Coast Artillery, which was B Battery. And so I figured out, well, I know these guys, so without standing up or anything, I went on my hands and knees until I got to the machine guns, and we got there. By that time, it was starting to get daylight. So two guys, a guy by the name of Melbourne and a guy by the name of Franklin, started carrying ammunition and machine guns to the places that were still in action. We found a 4x that was running, so we started using it to haul ammunition and guns. Frank was driving the truck and we was walking beside it with the armloads of stuff that the guys needed that were fighting, and a hand grenade lit down in front of us. And so I'd never seen a hand grenade before. I had no idea what it was. So I just gave it a kick and it went down over a bank and went off. And pretty soon another hand grenade from the same place hit us, and it went off. And, it shot me up and down my left side. I'm still carrying a piece of it. And I got hit in this leg with a gunshot. And Melbourne was bleeding from his leg. He had a hand grenade in his legs.
Injured and weak, Franz and the other soldiers still alive walked or crawled to the nearby first aid station where the nurses could care for them.
Within probably 500 yards from us was a little first aid station. We went over there to get bandaged up so we could keep on doing what we were doing. So we went in there and they saw us and they were cleaning us up and putting band-aids on, what have you. And in walked the Japanese. Now, they came into this first aid station. They about 3 or 4 of them walked the full length of it and turned around and walked back out. So we didn't pay any attention to us. They didn't say anything and what have you. But by that time, the flag was up.
The fighting ceased on May 6, 1942, when Corregidor's defenses collapsed. The Japanese took the survivors to Malenta Tunnel, where they were stripped of all their belongings. One of Franz's fellow comrades was shot when he refused to follow orders.
The Japanese told him to hold up his arms, and he just didn't do it. So they pulled him out of there and shot him. Now all of us was there, and saw Brown shot, and nobody ever knew what happened to Brown after that. But we did learn real quick, like, hey, they mean business.
The men were taken to Bilibid prison. They spent approximately 10 days there before being transported to Omuda, Japan on a cattle boat. Franz and the other prisoners of war were sent to work in local coal mines. Much of the cruelty that the prisoners endured came from the civilians who owned the mines and profited from their slave labor. The Japanese held the prisoners in more than 60 such camps throughout the war.
It was a big coal mine, one of the largest in the world, and we worked under the ocean. And they had 5 different levels of coal. We never knew which one we was going to work in when we went there. There was water leaking in off of the ocean. They had to pump that water out so we could get down to where the coal was. We did all the work that had to be done in that coal mine for 2 years and a month.
After returning from the mines, more cruelty awaited the prisoners. The guards punished them with severe beatings, and they went through each day not knowing if they would make it to the next.
Camp 17 was one of the roughest camps in Japan. We had one guy that they starved. It took him 48 days to starve him to death, when all they would give him was water. We all had to walk by his area where he was and see him being tortured and not doing anything, and nothing they could do about it.
The prisoners lived with constant hunger and disease. They went without food for so long that their bodies developed severe deficiencies. For 3.5 years, they survived on a cup of rice a day. Franz became ill with many different diseases, including scurvy. To this day, he suffers as a result of those years.
Malaria, yellow jaundice, I've had them all, and you just you live with them and do whatever it takes. 3.5 years I was hungry. There's days that I was full. I mean, my stomach was full, but you still didn't have what it took to cure your hunger.
On August 6, 1945, the Americans dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima. 3 days later, on August 9th, a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. More than 100,000 people died as a result, many immediately, and some later from the radiation poisoning. Franz was one of the few Americans who witnessed both atomic bombs hit. Although he was unable to view the immediate damage, he had a clear vision of the mushroom clouds hovering above the two cities.
I could see Nagasaki, which is across the bay about 35 kilometers, and I saw both bombs, the one at Nagasaki and the one at Hiroshima. The one at Hiroshima was almost due north from the island that we were on. We couldn't see the bottom place where the bomb actually hit, but we saw all the cloud of the big smoke and the big toadstools that came out from that.
After the atomic bombs hit, the Japanese surrendered and the war ended. More than 405,000 Americans had died in World War II. 672,000 Americans were wounded, and 79,000 Americans were missing in action. France and the prisoners of war being held in Japan were ready to go home. On their trip back, they passed through Nagasaki and witnessed the terrifying damage that had occurred there. The city was completely demolished, and thousands of lives had been lost.
Everything was blown or burnt because of the heat, intensive heat. This got so hot that smokestacks themselves would bend. You just can't imagine how much damage was really done.
After approximately 3 months, the soldiers returned to the United States. When they reached the port in Seattle, the soldiers looked toward the shore ablaze with lights, a shore that they had been away from for nearly 5 years. Strangers in their own land, the heroes were welcomed back to the country for which they had given so much. There, Franz made his first call home. His mother answered the phone. It was her birthday.
My mom and I were always close, and for the 4.5 years I was overseas, or 3.5 years I was missing in action, I had friends call my mom and want to know if they've heard from me or whatever. No, but he's going to be back. I finally made it, and I called, and it happened to be my mom's birthday. And I called her, and she answered the phone, and I told her happy birthday. So she was pretty well upset about that, but she was still glad, because that's the first time she had heard from me in that length of time, and so she was real thrilled.
Franz returned to Canton and soon after married Peg Chamberlain.
I was invited to a party in a residence down on Fulton Road, and she was there. I had one other date with her later on, and I just told her, I says, where the party was going to be, and I asked her if she wanted to go. She said no. She said she was tied up that night. So we went to that party, and she went with another guy, and she didn't know I was going to be there, and I didn't know she was going to be there. But from then on, things got together, and so we went together for a year, and we were married in 1947. When I was a prisoner and we came back from overseas, all the prisoners, as far as that was concerned, everybody, doctors, hospitals, specialists, everything, said that we would all come back, we wouldn't have any babies because we were all sterile from all the food and the diseases we had and starvations and what, that we would never have any babies. I did go for that, so we had 6.
Over the years, Franz has run into other veterans with whom he had been imprisoned in Japan.
A few years ago, the wife and I got on the bus. We would go to the shows and stuff like that from around Bronson. And we go to a show which we did one day, and some guy back 15, 20 rows, something like that, he says, "Hi, Dale." And gee, you know, who in the hell is this? You know, here I am, 1,000 miles from my house, and where are they? So come find out, he and I were prisoners together in Japan, and he lived in Texas. I don't know where, it doesn't make any difference, but he rode a bus like we did from Texas to Bronson. We rode one from Ohio to Bronson, and we meet out there, and we were prisoners together 3.5 years. So if we didn't have any problem getting out the hall and really greeting each other. All of us guys, all us PWs, we don't have to do any talking. It's just seeing each other, because we knew what they went through. We all went through the same thing. The wives, they're just like us guys. They're just super. When their husbands die, they keep coming. They get more kick out of it, and we're all real close bunch.
Through the harsh conditions of war and his imprisonment, Franz learned how to survive when things get rough.
You learn the hard way, and because for 2.5 years, or 3.5 years, I was subject to death anytime. You got to use your common sense that you're born with. You got to use it when you get in a spot like that. You'd be surprised at what you can do if you have to.
At the age of 86, Franz leads a very active life. He walks a mile every morning and spends his spare time working with a group of handicapped children in Stark County. He is also one of the founders of Pegasus Farm Equestrian Center for the Disabled.
Right now we got 32 head of horses, so we can just about fit any kid we want on them. Oh, you got a rainbow. How about that? Super. It's a therapy for kids. Basically, not only kids, blind people come here, people with car wrecks, they have therapies they have to go through. It's good for them, it's good for the horse. I like to help people that enjoy it. I'm just glad I'm around and can do those kind of things.
After all of the difficult and traumatic times that Franz experienced, to this day he still looks at life in a positive light, like he did when he was overseas fighting for his country.
I'm one of the most thankful guys alive, really. I'm 86 years old, and I plan on making a few more of them.